everyone, welcome back to my channel. It's True Crime with Jess Rose. I'm here every Thursday with a story that you might not have heard. I'm also over on the TikTok, which is Jess Rose 5472. You could join my Patreon, which is patreon.com/Jess Rose 5472, or you could just watch, which I'd appreciate just as much. I genuinely would. Okay. If you did see my post, if you happened to come across my post today, you would have seen that I was originally doing a different story. Due to just I'm waiting for more of a outcome to that, I have changed the story for this evening. Horrific, honestly. So it's the heartbreaking Autumn Lee Hallow story. Okay, so Autumn Lee Hallow, born on the 24th of August 2011 in Minnesota. It's an American story, okay? Her mum, Kelsey Kruze, and her dad is Brett Hallow, okay? Now, Kelsey and Brett met, I believe, through high school, okay? He's a couple of years older than Kelsey. I've got their name, their ages, sorry. About Kelsey 17 and Brett 20 when they first started their relationship. Now, I don't know if Kelsey could have possibly been slightly younger than that, but she ends up getting pregnant, and that's with Noah, a little boy called Noah, okay? And that was while she was still 17. And then shortly after that, as I mentioned, in 24th of August 2011, they go on to have little Autumn. All right, now Autumn, beautiful little girl, absolutely beautiful. All right, kind, sweet, said she was an aspiring artist. She loved music. Unlike a lot of kids, she really liked school as well, so that's quite sweet that she enjoyed school. She's very, very, very close with her brother. Obviously, there's only 11 months between them. I think Noah was born, and it was something like 3 months, just under, that she caught for Autumn. So, yeah, there's only 11 months between the two, so very, very close. But we get to 2013 now, and Brett, yeah, he's been messing about as Brett, and Kelsey finds out, and they break up, okay? So Kelsey, Noah, and Autumn all return to her family home, all right? So the pair go on to agree to 50-50 custody, okay? Now, originally it wasn't like that, I believe. I think Brett was having custody every second weekend, but he went to court. That there's different things that I've seen that's saying that maybe he didn't want to be on the hook for the child benefit. It's not child benefit, is it? You know, paying the child support. And that's why he pushed for 50-50 rather than he was missing his kids so much. Okay, so that's the impression I'm getting. Now, Brett himself, we are coming up to 2017 now, and Brett has began a relationship with a girl called Sarah Nasby. Now, it's 2017, which would make Brett 27, if I'm not wrong, okay? But she, at that point, is 17. So it seems like no matter how old he gets, he seems to like his 17-year-olds. Little bit like James Patterson Smith, wasn't it? The Kellyanne Bates story. No matter how old he was getting, his girls just got younger. So it seems like Brett, he's going that way. Okay, so anyway, he dated, neither here nor there. It's just something I noticed. So they date and they end up getting married quite quickly, and that was in 2017, as I mentioned. They do go on to have two boys together, and Sarah did have a daughter of her own. Now, by the end of this story, it does show that Autumn ends up with 4 brothers and 2 sisters split between her 2 parents, okay? But her full brother, only full brother, is Noah, okay? And they are very, very close. Not saying that they didn't love their other siblings, I'm just saying that they're the ones who are full siblings, okay? Again, neither here nor there. Now, Sarah, wow, so young, but she didn't like Brett and Kelsey communicating at all. She didn't like it. And I just think, but you've got a child with another man already. If you cut him off, you got no communication with him. Was it jealousy over that? Who knows? But she doesn't like it. So they go to the court, and she says that Brett is getting so stressed over having to communicate with Kelsey. And from what I'm seeing, all the research and the newspapers that I've read, it doesn't seem that Kelsey was that demanding. You know, it really didn't. Well, it's as we go on, you'll see that it possibly could have been done with being a bit more demanding, but we'll leave that. But yeah, Brett gets very stressed when Kelsey is in touch with him. So they go to the court, and the judge orders that Kelsey can only communicate with, obviously, about the kids through Sarah. Let me tell you, my blood boiled. My blood boiled when I heard that, because I was like, who are you? Who are you? You are new in all our lives, and you're now dictating if I can talk to my kid's dad about my children. Yeah, crazy, but that was the arrangement that was put forward, okay? So we all had to go through that. Now we get to, so that was 2017 when they got married, okay? But we'll come back to 2016 just briefly. And at this point, Autumn's 5 and little Noah is 6, okay? And Kelsey begins to notice bruises on Noah, okay? So Brett brushes this off. He brushes it off when obviously she asks him, and he's like, oh, you know, he fell over. It's something completely dismissing. And apparently this was quite a big bruise on little Noah's face. And Autumn, though, this is obviously while Kelsey she's having her custody of the 2 kids. Autumn comes forward and says it was Sarah hit him. And when Kelsey talks to Noah and says, look, who did this to you? He admits it was Sarah. She slapped him, and apparently it was because he'd wet himself. Isn't that an age? Isn't that, you know, no wonder these stories do begin to, one of my commenters earlier said they mould into one, and they sometimes do, which is horrific. And I'm not saying that each child suddenly becomes like moulds into it. I don't mean that. It's just there's always an order, isn't there, that these stories tend to go in, and it begins that way. Okay, so Kelsey calls Child Protective Services. She calls them. This story will infuriate you, but basically they couldn't find anything, you know. By the time they spoke to Noah, he no longer obviously said it was Sarah. And you know why? Because they were asking him in front of Brett and Sarah. Brett being his dad, remember, Sarah being his new wife. And they're asking this little boy in front of them, is it Sarah that hit you? Is it her over there? You know, who can absolutely batter you as soon as we walk out the door? Is it her? And of course he's going to say no. So CPS comes back, no further action. All right? So now we're coming up to 2019. Okay? Little Autumn's age 8 now, and Noah is age 9. Alright? And, oh, I didn't put it on. Do not disturb. Hopefully that's it. Hopefully that's it. If anyone who's got that bell, I apologise. I genuinely don't. Okay, so neighbours over this period of time have been reporting upsetting noises coming from Brett and Sarah's apartment. Okay, and the police were called so often to this apartment. It was, I just don't get this case at all. I genuinely don't, because it's not like they're in the middle of nowhere like a lot of the stories that I've done, where no one's around, no one's aware of stuff going on. They're in an apartment building. People are phoning CPS, they're phoning the police, and they're coming out and they're just basically going, let me look at your kids then. And they're going, yeah, kids are fine, and leaving. That's what's going on. Okay, so bruises again I noticed on Noah, and it was the school this time reported to CPS. So while this report's going on, maybe it's because of the school, maybe that's why they took it slightly, look, a smidge more seriously. But Kelsey looks after the kids for a couple of weeks while this investigation's taking place. Okay, but 2 weeks later, when they go back to Noah, who had come forward and, so brave, and says, what's happening to him, and that he is being beaten in that house. When CPS obviously asked him again, he's changed his story. He's terrified. And because of that, they don't believe it when he says they're doing it, but they do believe it when he says they're not. Oh God, it's frustrating this is. So Kelsey's forced and ordered to resume that joint custody again. Okay, now when it was time for Kelsey again turn to see the kids, Brett and Sarah, they refused to send the kids back. So Kelsey asked the police to go and do a wellness check. All right, the police again say the kids are fine, nothing wrong with them, they're fine. Okay, so when Kelsey finally gets to see her kids, so don't forget, she's had them for 2 weeks, she's had to hand them back, and they hang on to them, I believe it's for about 5-6 weeks. Okay, so when she finally gets to see them, Noah's got bruises all over, the child's black and blue. Oh God, Noah himself must have been terrified, and he makes up so many excuses. It went from falling, there was a kid at school that hit him, he tripped up, he tried to make excuses for some of them, but even a child with an imagination couldn't make up enough excuses for all the injuries that he had on him. Okay, so she takes him to the hospital, and whilst there, CPS are called. Well, no further action comes from that either. Right? So, in fact, at this point now, because obviously the police have been getting called, Kelsey's been constantly calling, neighbours are calling, she's not connected to them, but they start looking at Kelsey a bit funny. Not in the sense, I don't think they thought she was doing it, but just more thought maybe she was being petty. Yeah, God. And they said she was coaching Noah to say these things. Okay. Was she coaching him to also redact them? Who was doing that? So, apparently then, now don't forget, this is all in 2019, alright? Apparently a child in that apartment, so all I can assume it was maybe Sarah's own daughter. Don't think it could be the 2 boys they've had together, because they'd be quite young, so I'm assuming it's her daughter. All right, there was put forward another report, I'm presuming it was through the school, okay, and said another child in the apartment, she can only be talking about Noah, okay, was being really hurt at home, and he was having soap put in his mouth, his arms were being tied behind his back, he was being really hurt, he was being beaten, he was being made to do chores, and if he's not doing them quick enough, he was being hit and, like I say, being tied up. Nothing done still, even when they've got a child from that same house who's not directly, if it is Sarah's daughter from a previous relationship, remember, she's not directly related to Noah, and they still did nothing, okay? So Noah, he confides in Loki's school nurse, I believe, that what's happening at home is he's having to stay up all night. He's being forced to stay up all night, cleaning, doing chores, and then being sent into school, so of course he's exhausted. And if these chores aren't being done, or he falls asleep, or there's some sort of perceived cheekiness out of him, okay, if any of that goes on, he's having soap put in his mouth, or he's being hit. He's been locked in his room for hours on end. He hasn't even got a bed. He hasn't even got a bed. He's got no quilts. He's got no pillows. This poor child, and like I say, just beaten daily, okay? So Kelsey, at this point, she believes that for whatever reason, Brett and Sarah just have it out for Noah. Oh, and they do. Scapegoat syndrome, as a lot of these cases are, okay? So they've got it out for Noah. So, I'm so annoyed at this part of the story. I just am, because she speaks to Brett. Okay, no, I don't believe she's supposed to, but she does. And she comes to an arrangement, all right, that Noah, and I know she believes she's trying to save Noah, but she's going to have Noah for 3 weeks, and he'll just go to, I was about to say his dad's, I can't even say that, go to Brett's, okay, I can't call him dad, for 1 week. But Autumn, she will spend 3 weeks with Brett and Sarah, and then see her mum for 1 week. And all I could think at that point was, when do Noah and Autumn get to see each other? When do they? Because I remember I said they're so close. It's only 11 months between them. When do them two get to see each other? I mean, maybe the 3 weeks and the week overlap. I don't know, but it doesn't seem so. So they'd just be missing each other. I thought that was quite sad. As on top of everything else, on top of all the red flags associated with what I've just told you, you know. But she doesn't return Noah back to Brett at all. But she thinks Autumn's gonna be okay. She just does. She just thought all their temper was at Noah for whatever reason. Okay. Now, on the 1st of January 2020, all right, a call's made to the police from a neighbour about a girl screaming. Yeah, no one answers that. The police come, no one answers the door, and the police just go, what can you do? And they leave, all right? And around this time, Kelsey gives birth to a little girl. Kelsey, around over the not obviously not as quick as Brett did, but she had begun a new relationship with a man called Justin Osterbauer. Oh, I really hope I haven't butchered that. So she's had a little girl, okay. And Autumn, Brett and Sarah finally allow Autumn to go and see her little sister, and there is a photo, and it's, you can just see Autumn just wants to be part of that family, not this one. And it's a shame because she has got 2 half brothers at Sarah and Brett's. But as you'll realise, she can't have a relationship with them. So I'll explain that shortly, but it's just such a shame. She really wanted to have a bond with this little sister, and she got to stay there for a week, but that was it. She had to go back. Oh no. 26th of January 2020, as I said, she's had to return to her dad. February of 2020, another call to CPS, no further action. February 21st, another 911 call. I believe these are from neighbours. Police go round, nothing done, they don't answer. We get to March, another 911 call made by the neighbours, nothing done again. Okay, they're just not answering the door. Then we get to April. Okay, now Kelsey calls the police because Kelsey has been going round to that house as well, or that apartment, should I say, to collect Autumn. And Brett and Sarah were either not answering the door or they just weren't letting us see a child. It's just infuriating. So Kelsey calls the police. Okay. And Brett tells them he doesn't want to expose his family, his little family, to the situation we had in 2020. Becomes his excuse. How many of these stories have we done? How many of these 2020 stories have we done with children? Look, I lost count. It's disgusting. Okay. So that's his excuse. Oh, she's got a baby over there and we've got young kids here and, swapping and changing. It's going to expose us all. We're just following the guidelines. Okay. So 3 times in May, a 911 calls made by neighbours. More from Kelsey. And then in June, it's been 6 months since she's seen her little girl. 6 months. Okay, and the police go round, and this time Brett agrees, oh, we'll get her to wave to you from the balcony. And that's what they do. The police see Autumn from the balcony where she's waving to them, and they accept that. That's okay. Yeah, she's fine. We've seen her. She waved at us. Oh, God. August, another police call from a neighbour. And Kelsey was finding she was getting less and less help the more she was phoning. The more calls to CPS, the more phone calls to the police. But little does she know. I don't know if Kelsey knew. But it wasn't just her calling. The school had called. The neighbours were making daily calls to the police through, as I mentioned, unsettling noises, a child screaming, shouting, banging. I think on one occasion, Sarah opened the door and she said, oh, do you know what it was? Brett was on his game and you know what? He just got a bit carried away. Did he? Is that what's going on? Did he? Is that what happened? So we get to the 13th of August 2020 and little Autumn is nearly 9. She's nearly 9, okay. And 911's called and there's a call made from Brett and Sarah's, okay. And the caller, I believe it to be Sarah, says we've got an unresponsive child. Okay. So when, I don't know if it was on the call or when they came out, but Sarah made some excuse that, oh, she was in the shower and I walked in and there she was face down in the water and, I've brought her out here and, we've been trying to bring her around. We're not too sure what's happened, okay? Now, the paramedics themselves, though, they noticed that Autumn was very, very cold. really cold, rigid. She was dry, and she only had slightly damp hair, slightly. So how she, if she just got out of the shower, sorry guys, come on, sorry, I need to get her off, otherwise she's gonna, sorry about this guys, Bella says hi. Okay, so what a time to do that. Okay, so as I said, she only had slightly damp hair. Okay, so Autumn, bless her, Autumn was declared deceased at the apartment. Okay, 1 week and a half, 1 week and a half before her 9th birthday. Oh, just so sad. And the paramedics also noticed that Autumn was covered in bruises. She had clumps of hair missing. She looked, you know, she looked emaciated. This was a really, really poorly looking little girl that had just passed away. Well, I say just passed away. Bear with me on that, okay? Because the paramedics believed that Autumn had been dead for quite a while, okay? There was blood, as they were looking around, there's blood all around that apartment, okay? Especially in the bathroom, right? Now, the police spoke to one of the kids. Now, one of these kids, I'm assuming, because the child was age 6, I'm thinking it was one of the brothers, okay? That Sarah and Brett had together, okay? So, this child says that Sarah and Brett would tie Autumn up, and she'd be tied in a sleeping bag with just her head showing, okay? And in that sleeping bag, her hands would be tied behind her back. And this child goes, because she was being bad, you know, she kept trying to get something to eat. So you've brought a 6-year-old into your twisted punishments, basically saying this is what happens. This is what happens to her because she was trying to get something to eat because she was starving. Okay. Again, you know, it's the same order every time. And then a girl, age 10, who we can only believe is Sarah's daughter, who I think tried to get Autumn help already, okay? She said that Autumn was always being tied up, okay, in various rooms, including the bathroom. And on that day, Autumn had been tied up again. And what had happened was Autumn was screaming, which is obviously what those neighbours had been hearing. And that girl said, then I heard a loud bang. Alright. So, we get to the 14th of August 2020, which is the next day. Okay. Brett, who now is 30, and Sarah, who's 20, are arrested, okay, and charged with 2nd-degree homicide and 1st-degree manslaughter. But guess what, guys? Guess what the surprise is? There was camera footage in that house. Isn't there always? Oh, they love to record themselves, don't they? They love to record themselves. What story would be complete without that footage that they all seem to have? So we get to basically, so when the police say to Brett and Sarah, look, we've found the footage and we're not going for 2nd-degree homicide, we're going for 1st-degree homicide, which would, it'll give them, I think, life without parole. I don't think that state has the death penalty, but I think they'd have definitely got life without parole. So on the 21st of June 21, they both plead guilty, okay, because they're cowards and they knew what was coming. Okay, but when you plead guilty, you obviously, there's still a sentencing hearing. The prosecution still have to put all their evidence forward as they would in a trial, and because they pled guilty, they also have to tell the truth, say what they did, so it's not for the prosecution to sort of try and have to prove it anymore. They put it across and they have to basically admit to it. Okay, so they go back to 2019 when Noah was still living there. The footage goes back, so when they started recording, God only knows, but they did. Okay, so the footage shows obviously the abuse of Noah. All right, slapping, kicking, strangulation of him. There was footage of basically they'd been starving Noah. Of course they had. Of course, it's in the playbook. And he'd hidden some food in the bathroom. Bless him. Hadn't been able to get to it for whatever reason, whether he'd been tied up in a different room or he'd been locked in his bedroom, as I've mentioned earlier. But when they find this food, it's rotten. Oh, and Brett and Sarah are like, you're going to eat it. You're going to eat that. So he's punched and kicked over and over, forcing him to eat that rotten food. Apparently it took 6 hours for him to finish it while being beaten. Okay, and in that footage there was 20 separate occasions, maybe just over, of the dish soap being put on his tongue and him being forced to swallow it. I mean, and he's not being given water and he's not being fed, so you can imagine that building up, can't you? Just vile. And then it obviously shows through the footage and through the evidence, Noah's left, and now they're going after Autumn. So they've moved on in the scapegoat. Now, was it because Sarah hated Kelsey? Because Sarah was fully involved in this. No matter, regardless of her age, she was fully involved in this. Both of them were fully complicit. They were a tag team on these children. Okay, one wasn't any better than the other. One wasn't trying to save one or turning a blind eye. No, they were both fully complicit in this. So Sarah does admit that she would use makeup to cover the bruises on Autumn. And when that policeman was outside and Autumn was waving, Sarah had covered her in makeup. And that policeman would have seen that makeup on her face had he got and seen her face to face. But because of the year it was, he was obviously covering his own back. I don't want to get too near. 6 foot. Is that what he was? 6 meters, whatever it was. And he was quite happy to look at a child waving on the balcony. He maybe could have saved her. Okay. So there was a grey jumper that they would use. As a straitjacket for Autumn. So they would tie her arms behind her back. Okay, so that was the favourite one of them. And then obviously it moved on to putting her in a sleeping bag with her arms tied behind her back, just her head showing. And what Brett would do, he'd put food then in front of her, not quite where she could get it, so she'd have to try and eat it like a dog. And more often than not, she wouldn't be able to get to it. I mean, it's why it was all this was classed as torture, all of it. And if you're starving and someone's holding food just out of your, oh God. It wasn't just food. They weren't giving her water either. She was being dehydrated, beaten, constantly, not just on a daily basis, practically on an hourly basis, his child was being beaten, okay? Again, the chores, just like Noah, she was being made to do chores, and if she wasn't doing them quick enough, if she wasn't doing it to their liking, she was being made to stay up and do them. If she was tired and she was slacking, she was beaten. And then when apparently she'd finished these chores, she would just be tied up then. And the other kids in that apartment, i.e. Sarah's own daughter, and then Autumn and Noah's two half-brothers, who Brett had with Sarah, were ordered to ignore her. I mean, imagine dragging the kids into it as well. Dragging them into that disgusting thing you've come up with, and you brought your own kids into it as well. Now, August of 2020, Autumn, she could no longer stand. She couldn't speak. She was constantly vomiting. Okay? And the reason, they believe after the fact, was because she had a perforated bowel at this time. That's why she was vomiting so much. It wasn't because she had any food in her stomach. She had nothing. But she had this perforated bowel from being kicked, most likely, or punched. Okay. Now, Brett admitted that, yeah, he didn't like looking at her towards the end. Didn't like looking at her. So Sarah decided to tie her up and keep her in the bathroom, you know, for her final days. So that's where her final days were spent, tied up in the bathroom, okay? She'd been nearly starved with mostly no water for almost a month at that point. So from July to August, they'd literally been giving her nothing. And it was said that even when Noah was coming, Autumn wasn't treated great. Even, I don't think she was being beaten and tied up like Noah was. But Sarah admitted she never fed those two children what she'd fed her own, or what her and Brett ate. So she'd been badly treating them literally from the beginning. And she would have only been 17, 18 years old when she met these two children. And she was that vile from then. Rotten cat. Sorry. So, 13th of August 2020, which is the day little Autumn died, okay? And it started off at 8 a.m, alright? And Brett had been up for most of the night playing on his game or playing on his phone, apparently. Sarah got up and Brett said, oh, you know, should we watch some TV together, apparently? This is what they're telling the court. And because Brett had been up most of the night doing nothing, these people didn't work, they didn't do anything, they didn't, by scientific, they didn't even really leave the house, they just stayed there to torture this poor child. And Brett fell asleep, he said around 12 p.m, and he woke up shortly afterwards to Sarah screaming at Autumn to clean her vomit up, okay? So Autumn still vomiting in the bathroom. Sarah's livid, apparently, at the state of the bathroom. Oh, you loser. So when Sarah had said, clean this up, it was said that Autumn said, I'd rather die. I don't know if I can see a 9-year-old child saying that. I just don't know. Maybe she did. She certainly would have felt that way, maybe, for everything she was going through. And the pain. She had a perforated bowel at this point. So she was in a lot of pain. Just don't know. Did she say that? But Brett went into the bathroom, okay, after hearing his daughter say, I'd rather die, and hearing Sarah lose her mind. And does he go in and say, calm it down, you know, let's slow this down? No, he doesn't. He picks Autumn up by her neck and starts throwing her around. Right? And then he throws her down. And then Sarah grabs her by her throat and has her up against the wall. And when she lets go, Autumn collapses. She collapses to the floor. And do they show concern? Do they try and help her? No. Daddy Dearest boots her in her ribs. Kicks her straight in her ribs. Absolute right. And then Brett and Sarah, they leave her there. They leave her there on the floor and go about their day. They just go about their day. Brett falls asleep. Sarah's pottering around. Okay. He wakes up again, apparently about 3 p.m. now. So seems like he just stays awake all night, sleeps all day. Seems great. And when he's awake, just beats his child. Or helps his new wife beat her. Okay. He says when he woke up, it was to a bang from the bathroom. And Sarah shouting at obviously Autumn. And when he goes in there, Sarah is pouring boiling hot water onto Autumn. But Autumn's not moving. She's not moving at all. And Brett brings her into the bedroom and puts her on the bedroom floor. And Sarah calls 911. But Autumn, it said, she'd been dead for a while. She died in that bathroom after that initial beating that morning, where she was dragged around by her throat and kicked in the ribs. She died. And they just went about their day. And when she goes into the bathroom and sees this child who's dead, she pours boiling water on her to try and rouse her. Vile. Now, during her autopsy, little autopsy, okay, they weighed her. Now remember, she was almost 9, okay? She weighed 33 pounds. Just over 2 stone. Just over 2 stone. I mean, it said that it was less than half of the weight she should have been, but seems even worse than that to me. Seems even less, based on my own kids. Her manner of death was put down as asphyxiation plus blunt force trauma. Obviously, the cause of death, homicide. There was puncture wounds on the top of her head. Don't know what they're from. Most of her hair was missing. Been ripped out of her head. She had beautiful blonde hair. Just ripped out of her head. She was bruised from head to toe. She had abdominal bleeding. She had bleeding on the brain. And like I say, she was malnourished and dehydrated. This poor girl had been tortured for months. And then in her final month, they just decided to ramp it up. I mean, it reminds me a little bit of Victoria Climbié in the sense of when these children, and most of the stories I do, but most of these children, when they're at their weakest, is when these monsters really ramp it up then. They pull back even more food from them, more drink, like water from them. Their beating ramp up, their torture ramps up when that child's getting weaker. I don't get it. I don't understand. But in September of 2021, obviously they pled guilty. And Brett and Sarah were both given 40 years. And with having to serve a minimum of 27 years. Look, I know they pled guilty. I know they did. But the fact that they found the footage of this going on, I just don't think the plea deal should have been on the table at all. well, it wasn't a plea deal, was it? They pled guilty. But they pled guilty because they knew the footage had been found and they knew they could go for first degree. So I don't know why they didn't say no. No, you had your chance. You're only doing it now because you know we found the footage of you torturing 2 children. You know, 2 that didn't belong to you, Sarah, and the 2 that did belong to you, bruh. You know, so I just don't know how I feel about that time frame. I mean, he's 30, so 27 years will be 57, she'll be 47. You know, they can still come out and live a relatively, you know, live for a relatively large amount of time. Why are we allowing that? Why is that okay? I don't understand that. I don't. It's although, to be honest, you know, I always praise the American justice system. I always do. You know, for these crimes, and you know, normally there's either the death penalty or it's life without parole. So I suppose I was just a bit shocked at this, but 27 years, it's a lot longer than they've ever got here. You know, so I can make comments, but to be honest, if this had been one of the English cases I've done, yeah, they don't get that kind of time. You're lucky, you know, life here is 15 years, and you know, the whole life tariff is very, very few and far between. There are genuinely not many people who have been given a whole life tariff there. So I suppose when you think about it that way, it is a long time, but it's nowhere near as long as this pair should have got. Nowhere near. But yeah, that was the heartbreaking Autumn Lee Hallow story. Such a shame. I didn't mention it at the beginning, but there's so many of these stories. I was actually originally confused and thought, have I covered this one? That's how bad these cases are. This is how bad it's gotten. Because I was confused if I'd covered this story before. I had to go back and check my catalogue to see. And I felt terrible about that, because I like to think that I remember each individual case, but also it shows that there's a order to this torture that goes on in these child abuse stories. There seems to be an order. There's the shouting, the slapping, the hitting, then the child starts wetting themselves, then so the beatings ramp up, you know, then they start starving them, or they take away the water supposedly to stop them, you know, wetting themselves or going to the toilet on themselves, and then it just then they lose their beds, you know, then before you know, no one's allowed to talk to them, and as they're getting iller and you know, and poorlier, it ramps up. Especially around the year that no one wants to talk about anymore. You know, there's so many stories from that time. So yeah, absolutely heartbreaking. But thank you so much for joining me. I genuinely do appreciate it. As I say, I'm here every Thursday if you'd like to join me. Or you could just watch my on the pre-recorded. I am over on TikTok as well, so they do go up over there. Or you can join my Patreon. It's patreon.com/Jess Rose 5472. But other than that, thank you so much for joining me. I genuinely do appreciate it, and hopefully I'll see you next week. Thank you so much again.